In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world sleeps and the stars burn brightest against the velvet darkness, humanity has always looked upward with a mixture of wonder and dread. We stand on this small blue marble, suspended in an infinite cosmic ocean, and we ask ourselves the most profound question our species has ever conceived. Are we alone? And perhaps more terrifyingly, what happens when we discover we are not? This is not merely a question for scientists huddled around radio telescopes in remote deserts, straining to hear whispers from distant worlds. This is a question that reaches into the very core of what it means to be human, what it means to have consciousness, what it means to call ourselves the dominant intelligence on our planet. Because the moment we find definitive proof of alien life, whether it's a microbe beneath the ice of Europa or a transmission from a civilization 10,000 light years away, everything changes. Not just our science, not just our technology, but our philosophy, our religions, our sense of self, our place in the universe. We have prepared for this moment in fiction for over a century. We have imagined benevolent visitors sharing the secrets of the cosmos, and we have imagined malevolent invaders reducing our cities to ash. We have created countless scenarios, endless possibilities, infinite variations on first contact. But fiction, no matter how thoughtful, is still just fiction. The reality, when it comes, will be stranger, more complex, and more consequential than anything we've imagined. So what will we actually do? Not in the movies, not in the novels, but in the real world, with real governments, real militaries, real religious institutions, real people with real fears and real hopes? What protocols exist? What plans have been made? And perhaps most importantly, what does the answer to this question reveal about who we are right now, at this moment in our civilization's development? The search for extraterrestrial intelligence is not new. We have been listening for decades, sending signals into the void, launching probes beyond our solar system, carrying golden records with the sounds of Earth. We have pointed our most sophisticated instruments at the sky, analyzing the atmospheres of distant exoplanets for chemical signatures that might indicate life. We have devoted careers, fortunes, entire institutions to this quest. And yet, for all our searching, we have found nothing. The Great Silence, as it's called, surrounds us. The universe appears empty of others like us. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The universe is almost incomprehensibly vast. There are more stars in the observable universe than grains of sand on all the beaches of Earth. Around many of those stars orbit planets, and many of those planets exist in the habitable zones where liquid water could exist. The numbers alone suggest that life should be common, that intelligence should have arisen countless times across cosmic history. So where is everyone? This paradox, famously articulated by physicist Enrico Fermi, haunts us. If life is common, if intelligence is inevitable given enough time, then the galaxy should be teeming with civilizations. Some should be millions or even billions of years older than us, with technology so advanced it would appear magical to our eyes. They should have colonized the galaxy by now. We should see evidence of their existence everywhere we look, and yet we see nothing. The explanations for this silence are numerous and troubling. Perhaps we are truly alone, the first and only intelligence to arise in our corner of the cosmos. Perhaps intelligence is common, but inevitably destroys itself before reaching the stars. Perhaps civilizations are out there, but communication across such vast distances is simply impossible or impractical. Perhaps they are here, watching us, but choosing not to reveal themselves until we reach some threshold of technological or social development. Perhaps the universe is full of life, but consciousness and intelligence as we understand them are cosmically rare events. Each of these possibilities carries profound implications. If we are alone, then the burden of consciousness falls solely on our shoulders. We are the universe awakening to contemplate itself, and if we extinguish ourselves, that light might not arise again for billions of years, if ever. If civilizations routinely destroy themselves, then we are looking at our own likely future. If they choose not to contact primitive species like us, then we must ask what that reveals about the nature of advanced intelligence and what our own future might hold. But let us imagine, for the sake of this exploration, that the moment arrives. Let us imagine that one morning, a radio telescope in the Australian outback picks up a signal that cannot be explained by any natural phenomenon. A pattern of prime numbers, repeated at regular intervals, coming from a star system 40 light-years away. Or perhaps a probe examining the subsurface ocean of Enceladus discovers complex organic molecules and what appears to be cellular structures. Or maybe our most powerful telescopes detect atmospheric signatures on an exoplanet that can only be explained by industrial pollution, the unmistakable mark of a technological civilization. In that moment, everything changes. But how exactly does it change, and what do we do? The first reaction would likely be skepticism. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the claim that we have found alien life is perhaps the most extraordinary claim that could ever be made. The initial discovery would be examined, re-examined, and examined again. Teams of scientists around the world would scrutinize the data, looking for any possible alternative explanation, any error in methodology, any contamination of samples. This process could take months or even years, depending on the nature of the discovery. During this verification period, information would begin to leak. In our modern world of instant communication and whistleblowers, containing such momentous news would be nearly impossible. Rumors would spread through social media. Conspiracy theories would proliferate. Some would claim government cover-ups. Others would insist it was all a hoax. The scientific community would be divided, with some urging caution and others demanding immediate disclosure. Eventually, if the evidence remained solid under scrutiny, an announcement would have to be made. But who makes that announcement? Who speaks for humanity in this most critical moment? Do the scientists who made the discovery hold a press conference? Does the government of the nation where the discovery was made take the lead? Do the United Nations convene an emergency session? Is there even a protocol for this? The answer is that protocols do exist, though they are not legally binding and were created primarily by the scientific community rather than by governments. The most well-known is the Declaration of Principles concerning activities following the detection of extraterrestrial intelligence, drafted by the International Academy of Astronautics. This document suggests that discoveries should be verified before being announced, that all nations should be informed, and that no response should be sent to any signal without international consultation. But these are guidelines, not laws. They carry no enforcement mechanism. They were created in an era when the search for extraterrestrial intelligence was a fringe scientific pursuit with minimal funding. They did not anticipate the rapid advancement of technology, the proliferation of private space companies, or the complex geopolitical landscape of the 21st century. So in reality, the announcement of alien life would likely be messy, chaotic, and contested. Different nations and institutions would have different agendas. Some would want to control the narrative for political purposes. Others would see economic opportunities. Still others would prioritize scientific integrity, or philosophical implications. The first hours and days after the discovery became public would be a period of profound uncertainty and potential conflict. How would the general public react? This is perhaps one of the most important questions, because the reaction of ordinary people would ultimately shape governmental and institutional responses. Would there be mass panic, as some science fiction scenarios suggest? Would religious institutions declare the discovery a hoax or a test of faith? Would the stock market crash? Would there be riots in the streets? Most serious analysts believe that the reaction would be more complex and varied than simple panic. Humanity has been prepared for this possibility through decades of science fiction. The idea of alien life is not foreign to our collective imagination. Polls consistently show that a majority of people already believe alien life probably exists somewhere in the universe. The shock would not be in the existence itself, but in the confirmation, in the transition from speculation to fact. The nature of the discovery would matter enormously. Finding microbial life on Mars or Europa would be scientifically revolutionary, but unlikely to cause widespread societal disruption. It would confirm that life is not unique to Earth, answering one of our deepest questions, but it would not fundamentally threaten our daily existence or our conception of ourselves. We would still be the only known intelligence, the most complex form of life we had encountered. But receiving a signal from an intelligent civilization would be different. This would confirm not only that we are not alone, but that intelligence and technology are not unique to us. We would know definitively that somewhere out there, other beings look at the stars and wonder. Other beings build telescopes and satellites. Other beings have cultures, possibly languages, perhaps art and philosophy and science of their own. The psychological impact would be profound. Some people would feel a deep sense of cosmic connection, a joy at knowing that consciousness is not limited to Earth. Others would feel profound anxiety about what these aliens might be like, whether they pose a threat, whether they are more advanced than us, and what that might mean for our future. Religious communities would grapple with theological implications. If God created life on Earth, did God also create life elsewhere? Do aliens have souls? Did Christ die for their sins as well as ours? Different religions would likely respond in different ways. Some theological frameworks would accommodate alien life easily. The Catholic Church, for instance, has already suggested that believing in extraterrestrial life is not incompatible with Catholic theology. Other religious traditions might face more significant challenges, particularly those with more Earth-centric or human-centric doctrines. We can expect that new religious movements would emerge, some viewing the aliens as angels or demons, others as gods to be worshipped, still others as the fulfillment of ancient prophecies. History shows us that humanity often responds to revolutionary discoveries and encounters with new mythologies and belief systems. The discovery of alien life would likely be the most revolutionary discovery in human history, and the religious and spiritual responses would be correspondingly intense and diverse. Governments would face unprecedented challenges. National security establishments would immediately begin threat assessments. Even if the discovered life showed no signs of hostility or even awareness of us, the mere existence of another intelligent species would be treated as a potential security concern by military planners. This is simply how such institutions operate. They plan for worst-case scenarios, and an alien civilization with unknown capabilities and unknown intentions represents the ultimate unknown variable. If the aliens were detected via radio signal from a distant star, we would face the question of whether to respond. Remember, radio signals travel at the speed of light. If the civilization is 40 light-years away, our message would take 40 years to reach them, and their response would take another 40 years to reach us. This is a conversation that would play out over human lifetimes, possibly over multiple generations. Some would argue vehemently against responding at all. This is the position advocated by some scientists, most notably physicist Stephen Hawking, who warned that advertising our presence to advanced aliens could be dangerous. History on Earth shows us that when a more technologically advanced civilization encounters a less advanced one, the results are often catastrophic for the less advanced society. Why should we assume that alien civilizations would be any different? Why take the risk? Others would argue that if a civilization is capable of detecting and interpreting our response, they are likely already aware of us. Earth has been broadcasting radio and television signals into space for over a century. These signals expand outward in a bubble at the speed of light. Any civilization within that bubble with sufficiently sensitive instruments could already know we exist. Hiding at that point would be futile. We might as well attempt communication. This debate would not be settled easily or quickly. It would involve scientists, philosophers, ethicists, military strategists, politicians, and ultimately, in a democratic society, the public. Who has the right to speak for all of humanity? Who gets to decide whether we reach out to another civilization? These questions have no clear answers, and the potential for conflict between nations and ideological groups would be significant. If we did choose to respond, what would we say? What message could possibly represent the entirety of human civilization, with all its diversity, complexity, contradiction, and history? We have struggled with this question before, when creating the messages on the Voyager Golden Records and the Arecibo message. Those attempts, while noble, were limited by technology and by the need to fit vast amounts of information into compact forms. A response to a confirmed alien intelligence would face similar constraints, but the stakes would be infinitely higher. We would know that someone is actually listening. The message would need to be carefully crafted to avoid misunderstandings that could have catastrophic consequences. It would need to convey something meaningful about who we are, what we value, what we hope for. It would be, in essence, humanity's introduction to the cosmos. The economic implications of discovering alien life would be substantial and immediate. Stock markets would react, though predicting exactly how is difficult. Some sectors might crash on uncertainty and fear. Others might soar on the prospect of new technologies and possibilities. Space industry stocks would likely surge as governments and private companies increased investment in spacecraft, satellites, and related technologies. If the discovery suggested that the aliens possessed advanced technology, it could trigger a space race unlike anything we've seen before. Nations would compete to establish communication, to understand alien science, to potentially gain access to knowledge that could provide massive strategic advantages. This could accelerate space exploration and technological development at unprecedented rates, but it could also heighten international tensions and increase the risk of conflict. We must also consider the possibility that the discovery would reveal that the aliens are less advanced than us. This would be scientifically fascinating, but would raise its own set of ethical questions. Would we have a responsibility to protect this civilization from potential threats? Would we have the right to study them, to attempt contact? How would we prevent ourselves from becoming the invasive, potentially destructive force that we fear advanced aliens might be to us? The discovery of alien life, whether microbial or intelligent, would fundamentally alter scientific research priorities and funding. Astrobiology would become perhaps the most important and well-funded field in science. Understanding how life arose independently on another world would provide crucial insights into the origins of life on Earth. If we found that alien life used the same basic biochemistry as Earth life, DNA, RNA, proteins, it might suggest that this is the only viable path to life, or at least the most common one. If we found that alien life was biochemically completely different, it would expand our understanding of what life can be and where it might exist. The philosophical implications would be equally profound. For thousands of years, human philosophy has largely been anthropocentric, focused on human nature, human consciousness, human morality. Even when we've tried to think more broadly, we've been limited by the fact that we only have one example of intelligence to study, to ourselves. We don't know which aspects of human cognition and consciousness are universal to all possible intelligent beings and which are specific to our particular evolutionary history. Encountering alien intelligence would give us a second data point. We could begin to answer questions that have been purely speculative before. Is consciousness inevitable in complex information processing systems? Do all intelligent species develop language, art, music? Do they all have emotions? Do they all form social structures? What is universal and what is contingent? This knowledge would revolutionize not just philosophy, but psychology, sociology, anthropology, linguistics, and countless other fields. We could finally begin to develop a truly universal science of intelligence, rather than just a science of human intelligence. One of the most challenging aspects of alien contact would be communication. If we discovered microbial life, communication would obviously not be an issue. But if we detected an intelligent signal, or, even more dramatically, if aliens arrived at Earth, communication would become critical. The first challenge would be establishing that communication is even possible. We assume that any species capable of building radio transmitters or spacecraft would have sophisticated symbolic communication systems languages. But would their languages be anything like ours? Would they even process information in ways we can understand? Human language is deeply tied to our biology. We use sound because we evolved vocal cords and ears. Our languages have grammar structures that may reflect how our particular type of brain processes information. An alien species with completely different biology and cognitive architecture might communicate in ways we cannot even recognize as communication. They might use chemical signals like Earth's insects, but far more complex. They might use electromagnetic fields, light patterns, or vibrations through solid media. If they exist in environments radically different from Earth, perhaps in the cold hydrogen clouds of a gas giant, or the vacuum of space itself, their communication methods might be completely alien to our experience. Even if we could detect and record their communications, deciphering them would be extraordinarily difficult. With human languages, we can at least rely on shared human cognitive universals and shared references to the physical world. We can use context, gestures, objects, shared experiences. With aliens, we would have none of these advantages. We wouldn't even know if they perceived the world in the same basic ways we do, through sight, sound, touch, or if they had entirely different sensory modalities we can barely imagine. Mathematical and scientific concepts might provide common ground. The laws of physics are universal, and any technological civilization must understand them. We might be able to establish communication using mathematical concepts, then gradually build toward more complex ideas. This is the theory behind many of our attempts at interstellar messaging, like the Arecibo message, which was based primarily on mathematical and scientific concepts. But even mathematics might not be the universal language we hope. While the underlying truths of mathematics are universal, the way we symbolize and think about those truths is culturally determined. An alien civilization might have a completely different mathematical framework that describes the same reality in ways we would struggle to recognize. The timeline of communication would depend entirely on the distance involved. If we're talking about radio signals from a civilization hundreds or thousands of light years away, each exchange in the conversation would take centuries or millennia. Humanity as a whole would be engaged in a multi-generational project of communication, with children continuing conversations their great-great-grandparents began. This would require a level of long-term planning and commitment that our species has rarely demonstrated. If aliens actually arrived at Earth, the communication challenge would be both easier and more urgent. Easier because they would be here, allowing for rapid back and forth exchange and the use of physical demonstrations and references. More urgent because we would need to establish communication quickly to understand their intentions and prevent potentially catastrophic misunderstandings. The question of alien intentions is perhaps the most anxiety-inducing aspect of potential contact. What would they want from us, if anything? Why would they make the enormous effort to contact us or travel to us? Science fiction has explored countless possibilities. Resource extraction seems unlikely to motivate interstellar travel. The universe is full of asteroids, moons, and uninhabited planets, rich in resources and much easier to exploit than a planet already occupied by a potentially hostile species. Conquest for territory seems equally illogical for similar reasons. There are countless worlds in the galaxy. Why fight for one that's already inhabited? Scientific curiosity seems more plausible. If we are interested in finding and studying alien life, perhaps they would be equally interested in studying us. We might be a biological and cultural museum to them, interesting specimens to observe and catalogue. This possibility is somewhat comforting. At least they wouldn't want to destroy us, but it also reduces us to objects of study, potentially without regard for our autonomy or dignity. Some theorists suggest that sufficiently advanced civilizations might have transcended the kinds of motivations we understand: resource scarcity, territorial expansion, even scientific curiosity. They might operate according to principles and goals we can't even conceptualize, making their intentions completely opaque to us. There's also the unsettling possibility that advanced aliens might view us the way we view animals or even insect beings, with some level of awareness and capacity for suffering, but not deserving of the same moral consideration as themselves. We like to think that advanced intelligence would necessarily be coupled with advanced ethics and compassion, but we have no basis for that assumption. It's wishful thinking based on our own moral ideals rather than any universal principle. The most optimistic scenario is that any civilization that survives long enough to develop interstellar communication or travel must necessarily develop beyond the violent, competitive, zero-sum thinking that characterizes much of human history. They must have solved their own internal conflicts, developed sustainable relationships with their environment and each other, and adopted some form of cooperative or at least non-aggressive stance toward other civilizations. In this view, simply being contacted by aliens would be evidence that peaceful coexistence with other intelligences is possible and perhaps even inevitable for sufficiently advanced species. But this is again speculation built on hope rather than evidence. We simply don't know, and that uncertainty would dominate all our thinking and planning about alien contact. If aliens did arrive at Earth with clearly hostile intentions, what could we do? This is a question that military planners and science fiction writers have contemplated extensively. The pessimistic answer is probably not much. Any civilization capable of crossing interstellar space would possess technology so far beyond ours that resistance would likely be futile. Consider that the fastest spacecraft humans have ever built would take tens of thousands of years to reach even the nearest stars. A civilization that can actually travel between stars in reasonable timeframes must have overcome challenges we haven't even begun to seriously address. They might have near light speed drives, or they might have discovered physics beyond our current understanding that allows faster than light travel. They might have energy sources that make nuclear power look like a candle. They might have materials science so advanced that their spacecraft are essentially indestructible by our weapons. In a conflict between humans and such a civilization, we would be in the position of Stone Age tribes facing modern military forces. The outcome would not be in question. Our only hope would be that the aliens' ethics, laws, or practical considerations prevented them from simply eliminating us as obstacles. This stark power imbalance is one reason some scientists argue against actively attempting to contact alien civilizations. We have no control over the nature of any civilization that might receive our signals and decide to respond or visit. We would be taking a cosmic gamble with our entire species as the stake. Is satisfying our curiosity worth that risk? Others argue that this is an overly paranoid view, that space is so vast and travel between stars so difficult that even hostile aliens would be unlikely to make the journey just to destroy or conquer us. The distances provide protection. Even travelling at near light speed, a journey from a star system hundreds of light years away would take centuries from the perspective of observers on both the alien homeworld and Earth. From the perspective of the travellers themselves, relativistic time dilation might make the journey seem shorter, but it would still require enormous resources and commitment. Why would any civilization expend that effort on us? We have nothing they couldn't get more easily elsewhere, except for our biology, our culture, our unique evolutionary history. That makes us interesting, potentially valuable as objects of study, but hardly worth conquering or destroying. The scenarios we've explored so far assume relatively straightforward possibilities. Microbial life discovered on other worlds in our solar system, radio signals from distant civilizations, or physical arrival of alien spacecraft. But the reality of first contact, if it happens, might be far stranger than any of these conventional scenarios. Consider the possibility that we've already encountered alien life or intelligence, but failed to recognize it because it exists in a form so different from what we expect that we can't perceive it as life at all. Perhaps intelligence can exist as patterns in plasma, as quantum fluctuations in the fabric of space-time itself, as distributed networks in interstellar dust clouds. We look for life that is chemical-based, that requires liquid water, that exists at temperatures and pressures similar to those on Earth. But the universe is vast and strange, and life might have found ways to exist that we haven't even theorized. There's also the possibility of contact through time rather than space. If a civilization far older than ours once existed in our galaxy and has since vanished, they might have left artifacts, beacons, or even more exotic remnants behind. We might discover evidence of alien intelligence, not by detecting their signals or meeting them directly, but by stumbling across their ruins. Ancient alien structures on distant worlds, technological artifacts drifting in space, or even engineered objects within our own solar system that we've mistaken for natural phenomena. Some scientists have seriously proposed that we should be looking for such artifacts. The Moon, for instance, is geologically dead and has no atmosphere to erode structures. A probe or monument left on the lunar surface 1 million years ago would likely still be there, essentially unchanged. We've only explored a tiny fraction of the moon's surface, with robotic probes and human missions. Could something be waiting there, placed by visitors long before humans existed? It seems unlikely, but the consequences of such a discovery would be so profound that even a small probability might justify looking. Then there's the simulation hypothesis, the idea that our entire reality might be a simulation created by advanced beings, possibly as a scientific experiment, historical reconstruction, or even entertainment. In this scenario, the aliens would be the simulators, beings existing in a base reality while we exist in their simulation. Contact in such a scenario would be completely unlike anything we've imagined. It might take the form of glitches in reality, messages embedded in the fundamental constants of physics, or direct intervention by the simulators. This hypothesis, while controversial and unprovable, is taken seriously by some philosophers and physicists. If it's true, then the question of what we do when we discover aliens becomes the question of what we do when we discover that our entire reality is constructed. The psychological and philosophical implications would be even more profound than discovering conventional extraterrestrial life. Another strange possibility is that consciousness itself might be a universal phenomenon, not limited to biological entities. If consciousness arises from information processing, as some theories suggest, then perhaps it could exist in any sufficiently complex system. Stars, galaxies, or even the universe as a whole might possess some form of consciousness. In this view, we wouldn't need to search for alien intelligence. We'd already be surrounded by it, embedded in it, but unable to recognize or communicate with it, because the scale and nature of such consciousness would be so different from our own. These more exotic possibilities might seem like science fiction or philosophy, rather than serious consideration of what might actually happen. But they serve an important purpose. They remind us that our assumptions about life, intelligence, and contact are based on an extremely limited sample size. We know of exactly one planet with life, exactly one species with technology and complex language, exactly one example of how intelligence can develop and manifest. Extrapolating from one data point is scientifically hazardous. The truth, when we find it, might be far stranger than our most creative speculations. Regardless of the form first contact takes, one of the most critical questions would be, who represents humanity in our interactions with alien intelligence? We have no world government, no single institution with the authority to speak for all of Earth. The United Nations comes closest, but it's fundamentally an organization of nation-states, each with its own interests and agendas. In a crisis or opportunity as profound as alien contact, these nations might not agree on how to proceed. Imagine that a clearly intelligent signal is received, and it's determined that we should respond. Who writes that message? The nation that first detected the signal? An international committee of scientists? The UN General Assembly? What if different nations or groups send different messages, potentially contradicting each other? What if some messages are welcoming, while others are hostile or defensive? The lack of unified global governance has never been a more significant problem than it would be in the event of alien contact. Our divisions, our competing interests, our inability to cooperate on even relatively simple challenges like climate change or nuclear disarmament, all of these weaknesses would be exposed and magnified Some nations might see alien contact as an opportunity to gain advantage over rivals. If there's any possibility of acquiring alien technology or knowledge, you can be certain that intelligence agencies and militaries around the world would be working to ensure their nation gets access first. This could lead to a new kind of arms race, with nations competing not to build better weapons themselves, but to gain alien technology that could provide overwhelming superiority. The history of espionage and technological competition during the Cold War gives us some indication of how this might play out. When the stakes are high enough, when one side having a capability the other lacks could determine the outcome of potential conflicts, nations take extreme risks. Spies are recruited, facilities are infiltrated, scientists are debriefed or kidnapped, data is stolen. All of this could happen in the context of alien contact, but with stakes infinitely higher than nuclear weapons or missile technology. There's also the question of whether governments would be transparent with their populations about what was happening. Would they share all information about alien contact, or would some aspects be classified for national security reasons? History suggests that governments default to secrecy when they believe transparency might cause panic or give advantages to adversaries. But in the age of social media and ubiquitous surveillance, maintaining secrets is increasingly difficult. Leaks would be inevitable, and partial or distorted information might cause more panic and confusion than full transparency. Some people would inevitably distrust any official narrative about alien contact. Conspiracy theories would flourish, claiming that governments were hiding the true nature of the aliens, that secret deals had been made, that the aliens were actually demons or angels or time travelers, or any number of other alternatives to the official story. These theories might seem irrational to those who trust institutions and scientific authority, but they would gain traction among those who already distrust governments and mainstream institutions. This fragmentation of consensus reality is already a significant problem in modern societies, with different groups believing fundamentally different things about basic facts. Alien contact would likely exacerbate this fragmentation. We would not have one unified human response. We would have thousands of competing narratives, interpretations, and responses, each claiming to represent the truth. The question of how to maintain social cohesion and functional governance in the face of such profound disruption is not trivial. Societies are held together by shared beliefs, shared narratives, shared assumptions about reality. When those foundations are shaken, everything becomes unstable. We've seen throughout history how revolutions, religious movements, and ideological conflicts can tear societies apart. The discovery of alien intelligence could be the most destabilizing event in human history, precisely because it would challenge so many foundational assumptions at once. Education systems would face immediate challenges. How do you teach children about their place in the universe when that place has fundamentally changed? Every textbook, every curriculum would need to be reconsidered. The story we tell ourselves about human uniqueness, about our special place in creation, about the arc of history leading to our present moment, all of these narratives would require revision. Religious education would be particularly affected. Many religious traditions have creation stories, doctrines about humanity's unique relationship with the divine, beliefs about the purpose and meaning of human existence. How do these traditions adapt to the knowledge that we're not alone, that intelligence and perhaps consciousness exist elsewhere in the universe? Some traditions would adapt more easily than others, but all would need to engage with questions they've never seriously had to answer before. The arts would respond to alien contact with an explosion of creativity. Writers, filmmakers, musicians, visual artists would all grapple with this new reality, trying to process it, understand it, incorporate it into human culture. We would see new genres emerge, new aesthetic movements, new ways of thinking about and representing the human condition in a cosmos we share with others. But art would also serve another crucial function. It would help us cope emotionally with the profound changes to our worldview. Art processes trauma, helps us make sense of the incomprehensible, provides catharsis for feelings too complex for simple expression. Humanity would need its artists more than ever in the wake of alien contact. The immediate practical challenges would be enormous. If aliens did arrive at Earth or establish some form of direct communication, we would need protocols for interaction. Who gets to meet with them or communicate with them? What safety precautions need to be taken? Even if the aliens appear benign, there's the risk of biological contamination diseases that might spread from them to us, or vice versa, potentially with catastrophic consequences. The history of contact between previously isolated human populations is sobering in this regard. When Europeans first made contact with indigenous peoples of the Americas, diseases to which Europeans had developed immunity devastated populations that had no prior exposure. Smallpox, measles, and other diseases killed millions. The indigenous peoples had no way to predict or prevent this biological catastrophe. We could find ourselves in an analogous situation with aliens, either as the victims of alien pathogens or as the unwitting carriers of diseases that devastate them. Quarantine protocols would need to be strict and comprehensive. Any physical materials from aliens, their spacecraft, their technology, even their communications equipment if they brought it, would need to be treated as potential biohazards until proven otherwise. Any humans who came into contact with aliens or alien materials would likely need to be isolated and monitored for signs of infection or other biological effects. These practical considerations might seem mundane compared to the philosophical and cultural implications we've been discussing, but they would be critically important. A single mistake in biological containment could potentially doom our species or theirs. The pressure on the scientists, doctors, and officials responsible for managing these risks would be immense. There's also the question of what happens to human society and culture in the long term after alien contact. In the immediate aftermath, there would be disruption and chaos, as we've discussed. But what about years or decades later, after the initial shock has worn off? How would knowing that we're not alone change human behaviour, human institutions, human culture? Some believe it would unite humanity. Faced with the knowledge that we share the universe with others, our terrestrial divisions would seem petty and trivial. National borders, ethnic conflicts, ideological disputes, all of these would pale in comparison to the larger question of humanity's place in a cosmos of intelligences. We would recognize ourselves as one species, one civilization, one voice among potentially many. This recognition could be the catalyst for global cooperation on a scale never before achieved. This optimistic view holds that alien contact would provide the common challenge or common reference point that humanity has always lacked. We would finally have an outside perspective on ourselves, a mirror in which to see our commonalities rather than our differences. The petty tribalism that has plagued us throughout history would give way to a broader, more cosmic perspective. But there's an equally plausible pessimistic view. Contact with aliens could exacerbate existing divisions and create new ones. Some groups might embrace the aliens or the idea of alien contact. Others might reject it or view it as a threat. Religious fundamentalists might see aliens as demonic. Others might worship them as divine. Nationalists might view alien contact as a threat to their way of life. Globalists might see it as validation of their worldview. We could see humanity fracture into pro-alien and anti-alien factions, with each side viewing the other as traitors to humanity or deluded fools. We've seen analogous divisions in response to other large-scale changes and challenges. Climate change, for instance, has not united humanity in common purpose, but has instead become another axis of political and ideological division. There's no reason to assume alien contact would be any different. The long-term trajectory of human civilization after alien contact would depend enormously on the nature of the contact and the nature of the aliens. If we simply detected a signal from a distant civilization with no possibility of two-way communication in our lifetimes, the impact might fade over time. It would remain a significant historical and scientific fact, but daily life would continue much as before. We would know we're not alone, but that knowledge would be abstract, distant, having little immediate practical impact. If ongoing communication was established, even if delayed by light-speed travel times, the impact would be more substantial. Each message from the aliens would be a major event, analysed and debated by scholars, officials, and the public. Over generations, a body of knowledge about the alien civilization would accumulate. We would learn about their history, their science, their culture. They would learn about ours. This mutual exchange could profoundly influence both civilizations, even without physical contact. The most transformative scenario would be if aliens shared advanced knowledge or technology with us. Imagine if they transmitted the designs for a new energy source, a cure for cancer, or a means of faster-than-light travel. Such knowledge could catapult human civilization forward by centuries or millennia. It could solve our most intractable problems and open possibilities we've only dreamed of. But it could also destabilize our civilization. Technologies are not neutral tools. They shape societies in profound ways. The introduction of agriculture transformed nomadic hunter-gatherers into settled farmers, enabling the rise of cities, states, and civilizations. The Industrial Revolution transformed agrarian societies into urban, industrial ones, bringing both unprecedented prosperity and new forms of exploitation and environmental destruction. The digital revolution is currently transforming industrial societies in ways we're still trying to understand and manage. Alien technology, especially if it's far beyond our current capabilities, could cause disruptions that make previous technological revolutions seem minor by comparison. Economic systems could collapse if alien energy technology made fossil fuels obsolete overnight. Political systems could fracture if some nations gained access to alien technology before others. Social structures could break down if alien knowledge challenged fundamental assumptions about human nature, consciousness, or reality itself. There's also the risk that we would become dependent on alien knowledge without truly understanding it. Arthur C. Clarke famously wrote that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. If aliens gave us technology that we could use but not comprehend, we would be in a position of profound dependency and vulnerability. What if the technology had hidden functions or consequences we didn't understand? What if the aliens, intentionally or not, gave us tools that would ultimately harm us? Some scientists and philosophers warn against accepting gifts from alien civilizations for exactly this reason. We should develop our own technology, make our own mistakes, chart our own path forward. Shortcuts might seem appealing, but they could cost us our autonomy and our future. We might become a client species of a more advanced civilization, forever dependent, forever subordinate, never able to stand as equals. This tension between the desire for knowledge and the need for caution would be at the heart of any long-term relationship with an alien civilization. How much do we trust them? How much do we accept from them? How do we maintain our independence and chart our own course while also benefiting from what they might teach us? These are not just practical questions, they're profoundly moral and existential ones. They get at the heart of what we want humanity to be and to become. Do we want to be a species that stands on its own, that faces challenges independently, even if that means developing more slowly and suffering setbacks? Or do we want to be part of a larger cosmic community, accepting help and guidance from those who have travelled this path before us, even if that means accepting a subordinate role? Different people, different cultures, different nations would answer these questions differently, and those differences could become sources of conflict as profound as any we've experienced in our history. The question of whether we should try to contact aliens or wait for them to contact us remains hotly debated. Some argue that we should be actively broadcasting our presence, sending powerful signals into space, announcing our existence, and inviting response. This is the approach known as active SETI, or METI, messaging to extraterrestrial intelligence. Its proponents argue that we have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Any civilization capable of receiving our signals and travelling to Earth is likely already aware of us or could detect us easily if they looked. Hiding is futile, so we might as well reach out. Others vehemently oppose active attempts to contact aliens. They point out that we have no idea who or what might receive our messages. Broadcasting our presence to the entire galaxy is like walking into an unknown forest shouting at the top of your lungs. You might attract friendly attention, or you might attract predators. The rational approach, they argue, is to listen but not transmit, to gather information about what's out there before announcing ourselves. This debate has become increasingly heated in recent years, with some scientists sending messages without broad international consultation or approval. This has prompted calls for regulations or international agreements governing who has the right to send messages into space on behalf of humanity. But enforcing such agreements would be difficult. Anyone with access to a powerful enough transmitter could send signals into space. In our interconnected world, preventing this would be nearly impossible. The most likely scenario is that we'll continue to do both, listening passively with radio telescopes, while occasionally sending active messages, with no unified strategy or approach. This muddled, decentralized approach is very human and not necessarily bad. It hedges our bets, pursuing multiple strategies simultaneously, but it also means that our first contact with aliens, if it comes through our own efforts rather than theirs, will likely be accidental, chaotic, and poorly planned. We should also consider the possibility that alien civilizations might be subject to the same debates, divisions, and uncertainties that we are. We tend to think of aliens as monolithic. They decide to contact us, or not. They have intentions and plans. But any civilization complex enough to develop technology and science is likely complex enough to have internal disagreements, competing factions, diverse viewpoints. Perhaps there are aliens who want to contact us, and aliens who don't. Perhaps their civilization is debating the same questions we are. Perhaps they're watching us, arguing among themselves about whether to reveal their presence, how to approach us, what to share, and what to keep secret. Perhaps they're just as uncertain and divided as we are. This possibility is strangely comforting. It suggests that the challenges we face in contemplating alien contact are not unique to us, but are perhaps universal features of intelligence grappling with the unknown. It also suggests that aliens might be more relatable, more comprehensible than we fear. If they struggle with the same dilemmas we do, they might not be entirely alien after all. But it also means that contact between civilizations could be even more complicated than we've imagined. It wouldn't be humanity meeting the aliens, but rather one complex, divided civilization encountering another. Misunderstandings could arise not just from linguistic or cultural differences, but from the internal politics of both species. What one faction of aliens tells us might be contradicted by another. What one faction of humanity responds might be repudiated by another. The potential for chaos and confusion multiplies when we recognize that both sides of any contact would be plural, diverse, and potentially conflicted. As we contemplate these scenarios, we must confront a deeper question. What does our response to the possibility of alien life say about us right now, before we found anything? The way we imagine aliens, the fears and hopes we project onto them, the policies and plans we make in anticipation of contact, all of these reveal something about our current state as a civilization. We fear hostile aliens because we know how humans have historically treated other humans, especially those perceived as different or inferior. We hope for benevolent aliens because we wish to believe that intelligence and wisdom go hand in hand. That advancement means progress, not just technologically, but morally. We debate whether to hide or reveal ourselves because we're uncertain whether cooperation or caution is the better strategy in an uncertain universe. These are fundamentally questions about ourselves. Are we a species that can be trusted with contact with others? Are we mature enough, wise enough, unified enough to handle the profound responsibility of representing Earth to the cosmos? Or are we still too violent, too divided, too short-sighted to manage such an encounter without disaster? The honest answer, looking at our current state, is troubling. We cannot cooperate effectively to address even existential threats of our own making, like climate change or nuclear weapons. We are divided by ideology, religion, nationality, race, and countless other categories. We have wiped out countless species on our own planet through carelessness and greed. We still wage wars, still exploit and oppress our own kind, still struggle with tribalism and hatred. From this perspective, perhaps the best thing that could happen is that we don't find aliens yet. Perhaps we need more time to grow up as a species, to solve our own problems, to develop the wisdom and maturity necessary to engage with other intelligences responsibly. Perhaps the Great Silence is a blessing, a quarantine that protects both us and potential alien civilizations from each other until we're ready. But there's another way to look at it. Perhaps contact with aliens is exactly what we need to grow up. Perhaps facing the reality that we share the universe with others would provide the necessary shock, the unavoidable challenge that would force us to transcend our divisions and limitations. Perhaps we would rise to the occasion, discovering capabilities and wisdom we didn't know we possessed. History provides examples of both possibilities. Sometimes great challenges bring out the best in humanity, the cooperation and sacrifice of fighting truly existential threats. Sometimes great challenges bring out the worst, the fear and violence and tribalism that emerges under pressure. Which pattern would prevail in the face of alien contact is impossible to predict. What we can say is that the question of what we will do if we discover aliens is inseparable from the question of who we are and who we choose to become. Every decision we make now about how to search for alien life, how to prepare for potential contact, what messages to send into space, these decisions are shaping us, revealing us, preparing us for a moment that may or may not come. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence is not just about finding others, it's about defining ourselves. It's about deciding what kind of civilization we want to be, what values we hold, what future we're working toward. When we look into space and wonder who else might be out there, we're also looking into ourselves, confronting the mirror of our own nature, reflected in the infinite darkness. And perhaps that's the deepest answer to the question we began with. What will humanity do if we discover aliens? We will do what we always do when confronted with the unknown, the challenging, the profoundly transformative. We will adapt, we will argue, we will struggle, and eventually transcend. We will make mistakes and learn from them. We will be divided and eventually find common ground. We will be afraid and eventually find courage. We will be uncertain and eventually create meaning, because that is what it means to be human, to face the unknown, not with a predetermined plan, but with the messy, chaotic, ultimately creative process of being alive, being conscious, being part of something larger than ourselves. The aliens, if they exist, if we ever meet them, will encounter not a unified, perfectly rational species with clear answers and elegant solutions. They will encounter us, contradictory, passionate, brilliant, foolish, hopeful, frightened, curious, cautious, brave, and fundamentally, beautifully alive. And in the end, perhaps that's enough. Perhaps the fact that we ask these questions, that we look up at the stars and wonder, that we build telescopes and send messages and dream of contact, perhaps that's evidence that we're ready, or at least as ready as we'll ever be. Not perfect, not finished, not fully matured, but alive and aware and reaching outward, ready to take the next step in our journey through the cosmos, whatever that step might bring. The universe is vast beyond comprehension, and we are small, but we are also remarkable, the universe becoming aware of itself, reaching out to find other instances of awareness, other voices in the darkness. When we finally do encounter those other voices, if we ever do, it will not be because we were ready in some absolute sense. It will be because we were brave enough to look, curious enough to listen, and hopeful enough to reach out despite all our fears and limitations. And that, ultimately, is what humanity will do when we discover aliens. We will be ourselves in all our complexity and contradiction, and we will write the next chapter of our story together with whoever or whatever we find out there in the cosmic ocean we're all swimming through.